Montana Territory, December 1871. The snow was falling hard, sweeping sideways in the wind, when Warren Ellison spotted the shape in the white. He reined in his mare, squinting through the flurry. At first, he thought it was a pile of drifted pine boughs until it moved. He kicked his boots into the stirrups and rode hard. She was curled under a thin wool blanket, half buried beneath a sagging pine. Her face was pale, lips cracked, and in her arms, wrapped in a tattered shawl, was a baby. The infant squirmed weakly, letting out a whimper so soft Warren almost missed it. "Ma'am," he said, sliding down from the saddle. "Are you alive?" Her eyes fluttered open at the sound of his voice, bloodshot and dazed. Her arms tightened around the child. "Please," she whispered. "Help her." "I will," Warren said. "You both. I promise." He didn't ask questions. He scooped them up, blanket, woman, and baby all together, and set them on his horse, holding her steady with one arm as he led the mare through the storm. His cabin was 4 miles west, tucked between rock bluffs and a frozen creek. He moved fast. By the time he got them inside, the woman had gone limp again. Warren laid her on his cot, pulled off her wet boots, and wrapped her in every quilt he owned. He stoked the fire higher, then took the baby and held her to his chest. She was swaddled in little more than rags, her skin red from the cold, but she was warm enough to cry now, and that was something. "SHH, little one," he muttered, rocking her gently. The woman stirred as he was warming milk over the fire. Where are we?" "Safe," Warren said, kneeling beside the cot. "My name's Warren. I found you out past the old ranger's trail." She blinked slowly, her eyes focusing. "I thought we were going to die." "You are not," he said. "Neither of you." She looked down at the baby in his arms, and her mouth trembled. "Her name's Olive." Warren nodded. "She is strong." The woman's voice cracked. "I'm Josephine." He offered his hand. She took it with trembling fingers. "Josephine Finch," she whispered. Then her eyes rolled back and she passed out. Josephine woke again that night, soaked in sweat, fevered and coughing. Warren nursed her with broths and cool cloths, never leaving her side more than a few minutes. He built the fire high and held Olive close so she could sleep warm in the crook of his neck. 2 days passed before Josephine could sit up. Warren helped her drink and eat soft bread. She was quiet, but her eyes were clearer. "You do not have to stay," she said on the 3rd day, watching him from the cot. "I do," Warren said, gently bouncing Olive on his knee. "You are not out of the woods yet." Josephine looked down at her hands. "You already did more than most would." Warren leaned forward. "Why were you out there?" She hesitated. He waited. "My husband died in September," she said finally. "We were headed for Helena. He got sick, real bad. We buried him near Bozeman. I kept going because I did not know what else to do. And your family, gone or back east?" "I do not know anymore." Her voice caught, but she kept talking. "I thought maybe we could find work in the city. I had a wagon and a mule, but the mule ran off during the storm." She looked at Olive, who had fallen asleep in Warren's arms. "I wrapped her up and just walked. I thought we would find someone, but no one came." "I did," Warren said. Josephine looked at him, eyes wet. "Yes, you did." By the end of the week, Josephine was strong enough to walk. She moved slow, holding to chairs and walls, but she smiled more. Warren built a small cradle out of pine for Olive, carving smooth corners and tying a red ribbon to one post. Josephine ran her fingers over it, quiet with emotion. "You built this." Seemed like she needed one. She touched his arm. "Thank you." They shared dinner that night, salt pork stew and cornbread. Olive slept in the cradle beside the fire. Josephine leaned back in the chair across from Warren, her cheeks pink, her hair brushed back from her face. "You live here alone?" she asked. "I have since the war ended," Warren said. "Worked cattle, trapped, built this place with my own hands." Josephine studied him. You never married? No, she smiled softly. Hard to believe a man like you stayed single. He looked at her, a flicker of something warm rising in his chest. Hard to believe you were out there in the snow with no one. Her eyes met his and held. I was not alone for long. Snow kept falling. Another storm rolled in and the wind howled at the corners of the cabin. They stood close by the fire, Josephine wrapped in Warren's coat, Olive nestled asleep in her arms. I do not know how to repay you, Josephine said. I am not asking for anything, Warren replied. She looked down. You think I am weak? I think you are stronger than anyone I have met. She looked up at him then, her face open and raw. You saved us. Warren reached out and brushed a curl from her cheek. I will keep doing it. Josephine stepped closer, her breath warm against his chest. You have a good heart. He touched her face gently. So do you. They stood there, inches apart, and the quiet between them was solid and full. Josephine said softly, I stopped believing people like you existed. I stopped believing anyone needed me. She looked up, her eyes shining. I do. And then she leaned into him, and Warren wrapped his arms around her, steady and sure. He whispered, I am not going anywhere, and he meant it. Warren had started carving a set of wooden spoons when Josephine came back from the creek, her skirt damp from snowmelt and her cheeks wind-bitten. She'd gone to rinse out the baby's linens, bundled Olive in a quilt by the hearth while she worked. Her sleeves were rolled to the elbows, fingers red and raw. Warren set the knife and cedar aside. You could have asked me to go. Josephine set the basin down near the fire and knelt to warm her hands. I needed the air. You could lose a hand to cold like that. She flexed her fingers close to the flames. I've done worse for less reason. He didn't press her, just poured water into a kettle and set it above the flames. The silence between them had grown easy, not empty. Josephine shifted her weight, glancing at the cradle. She started teething, felt a nub on her bottom gum this morning. Warren raised his brows. Already? She's early for everything, sat up at 3 months. My sister said it was unnatural. You have a sister, had. Warren studied her face. She didn't explain further and he didn't ask. Josephine stood and took the cup he offered her. You always make tea taste like something worth drinking. He gave a quiet chuckle. Boiled pine needles and wild mint, not hard to come by. She sipped, then leaned against the table, her profile catching the firelight. This place, it's yours through and through. It's quiet, he said. I figured no one would bother me out here, until I did. He met her gaze. I'm glad you did. Josephine lowered her eyes and a small smile touched her lips. I don't know how to be in someone's debt. You're not. She looked up again, steady this time. You could have left me. I didn't. And if I died, you didn't. They stood there, warm light flickering around them, the only sounds the pop of the fire and Olive's soft breathing. Josephine set her cup down. When I was young, I used to dream of Canada. Somewhere with trees that never ended. You lived in a city, St. Louis. The noise never stopped. Even at night, you'd hear wagons, drunks, dogs barking. And you came west. My husband wanted land, thought we could raise goats. He read it in a pamphlet, said Montana had promise. Warren rubbed a hand across his jaw. He wasn't wrong. Josephine's expression didn't change, but something in her voice softened. He tried. He wasn't cruel, just hopeful to a fault. Warren nodded once. Hope can be dangerous. He believed in it more than he believed in me. She said it without bitterness, just fact. Her eyes lingered on the hearth, then drifted to Warren. You don't ask much of people, do you? No. Why? They disappoint. She stepped closer, her hands loose at her sides. And what if they don't? He held her gaze. Then maybe I stay. Her breath caught just a little. She reached out, brushing something from his sleeve that wasn't there. I never knew a man who kept his word like it was a living thing. He said nothing, just watched her. Josephine turned her head slightly. I don't know what I'm supposed to do now. You don't have to know today. I used to plan everything. Meals, routes, where we'd stop, how long we'd stay. Now I can't think past tonight. Tonight's enough. The kettle hissed as it reached boiling. Warren turned to lift it, but Josephine's hand touched his sleeve again. He looked back. I like it here, she said, her voice quiet. Even with the wind, even with the cold. He didn't smile, but something settled in his eyes. Then stay. Josephine's fingers curled around the edge of the table. I won't be a burden, you're not. I mean it. I can sew, mend, I can make things stretch. You don't have to prove anything. She looked down, then back up. I want to. Warren poured the water into the basin beside the fire, steam rising between them. You don't owe me, I know. But maybe I want to give something back. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. It was the first time he'd touched her without cause. She didn't flinch. I'll build you another chair, he said, so you don't have to sit on the stool every night. Josephine's mouth curved. You don't have to do that. I want to. She didn't look away. Then I'll make curtains, something red. The windows are too bare. They stood like that, quietly trading intentions, not promises, not yet, just building something from the stillness. Olive stirred in the cradle, letting out a soft, restless cry. Josephine moved to her, lifting her gently. She knows when I'm calm. She sleeps better when I am. Warren stepped back, giving her space. Then she should sleep well tonight. Josephine looked over her shoulder. So should you. He gave a slow nod. Maybe I will. The wind had calmed by morning. Pale light filtered through the frost-laced windows, casting long shadows across the floorboards. Warren was outside early, chopping a felled spruce into manageable lengths. The rhythmic thud of his axe echoed through the trees, steady and sure. Inside, Josephine stood at the table with Olive balanced on her hip. She was stitching a torn hem on one of Warren's wool shirts, the needle moving with quiet precision. Olive's fingers curled around the collar, tugging gently whenever Josephine paused. You'll tear it again before it's mended, she murmured, kissing the top of her daughter's head. The door creaked open and Warren stepped in, cheeks ruddy with cold, arms full of firewood. He set the bundle by the hearth and brushed snow from his sleeves. I brought in enough to last a few days, he said. Storm's done, but there's more coming behind it. Josephine nodded. I can dry what's left of the linens today. Smoke'll take out the damp. Warren glanced at the cradle. She sleep much, a little. She's fussier now, gums bothering her. He stepped closer and offered Olive his finger. She gripped it tight, gnawing without much force. Warren chuckled under his breath. She's got your eyes, he said. Josephine's sewing slowed. Everyone said she had her father's mouth, but her eyes, I suppose those are mine. Warren looked at her, then leaned against the wall, arms crossed. You ever think of settling somewhere else? She tied off the stitch and sat down. Sometimes. But I've moved enough to know geography doesn't settle a soul. He tilted his head. What does? Knowing what won't leave you. He didn't speak for a moment, then he said, There's a small clearing just east of the bluff. You could plant something come spring. Potatoes, maybe beets. Josephine's brow lifted. You're offering me a garden. I'm offering you something to stay for. She looked at him, quiet, thoughtful. You don't talk much about yourself. He walked to the stove and poured water into the tin basin, steam rising as it struck the cold metal. Not much to tell. There's always more than men let on. He washed his hands, then dried them on a woolen rag. I was born near Springfield. Fought at Stones River. After that, I didn't go back. Family, none left. She traced a finger along the wood grain of the table. That war took a lot of things. Made it easier to be alone, he said, then paused. Until now. Josephine stood and laid the shirt across the back of a chair. You're not the only one who learned to live without. He crossed the room and stopped beside her. "I don't want you to have to do that anymore." Her voice caught slightly, but she kept it steady. "Neither do I." Olive let out a soft cough, and Josephine shifted her arms to soothe her. Warren reached up and helped adjust the shawl around the baby's shoulders, careful and slow. "I could build a second bed frame," he said. "Smaller, for her." Josephine's eyes lifted. "You think we'll still be here come spring?" "I'd like to be." She studied him, something unspoken passing between them. Then she nodded once. "Then yes," she said. "Build her a bed." They spent the afternoon in companionable silence, Warren working outside beneath a sky turning leaden again, Josephine mending, sorting, tidying the corners of a life she hadn't meant to start here but was beginning to feel rooted in. By dusk, a stew of elk and barley simmered over the flame. Josephine mashed cooked carrots into a paste and coaxed Olive to eat from a carved spoon. Warren watched from his chair, his expression unreadable but softened. After the meal, Josephine settled into the rocker with Olive asleep on her chest. Her hair had fallen loose and her stockings were patched at the heel. She looked worn, yes, but not hollow the way she had that first day. Warren stirred the fire. "I've got a cousin out in Dillon. Runs freight. Might bring up sugar and flour next week if the pass stays clear." Josephine shifted slightly. "Could he bring cloth?" "Likely," she nodded. "I'd like to make her a proper dress." He sat on the floor by the hearth, elbows on his knees. "You sew like someone taught you young." "My mother did. Said a woman ought to know how to stitch what she wears and what she loves." Warren's eyes flicked toward her, then back to the fire. "You think you'd stay here for good?" Josephine didn't answer at once. Then she said, "Not because I have nowhere else, but because I've finally found somewhere I don't want to leave." He didn't smile, but his hand reached out, palm up, resting near her foot. She looked down at it, then placed her fingers over his. The fire crackled, and outside the stars began to pierce the dark. Warren squeezed her hand once, firm and quiet. Josephine didn't let go. By mid-January, the snow had hardened into drifts high along the north wall of the cabin, and the creek behind the bluff lay silent beneath a thick crust of ice. The days passed in a quiet rhythm, not marked by clocks or schedules, but by the way Olive gurgled after feeding, or the way the light tilted through the window around supper. Warren came back from checking the traps near the ridge, his coat crusted with frost, a rabbit and 2 squirrels slung over one shoulder. Josephine opened the door before he reached it. "You're tracking well," she said, stepping aside. He brushed his boots and set the catch near the hearth. "Snow's deep enough now the prints hold shape for days." She lifted the smallest squirrel. "You want this for broth?" Warren set down his knife. "It'll do well enough with onion and sage. I'll clean them." Josephine didn't move away. "Let me." He looked at her hands, already calloused again from work. "You don't have to, I know, but I want to." She took the animals with practiced ease and brought them to the table. Her back was straight and her sleeves stayed dry. Warren watched her for a moment, then turned to check the fire. "That's a neat hand," he said after a while. "My uncle was a tanner," she replied. "Taught me to skin clean. Said waste dishonored the animal." Warren nodded once, then reached for the kettle. "That man sounds like he had sense." "He did, more than most." She scraped the hide clean, her movements careful. "He offered to take me in after the war. I didn't go." Warren didn't ask why. Josephine glanced toward the cradle. Olive was asleep, one hand curled near her cheek. "He didn't approve of the man I married. Said he was too quick to speak and slow to think." Warren sat at the table. "You regret not listening." She tied the hide into a strip and set it aside. "Sometimes, but if I had, I wouldn't have her." Warren looked at Olive. "She's worth the detour." Josephine smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I used to think life had a straight path. A good woman and a good man, a house, a fence, a row of beans, but it's all turns and forks. You just don't see them coming. He leaned forward. You think you're through the worst of it now. I think I'm somewhere I can breathe again. They lapsed into silence, not strained, just full. The wind outside had settled into a low moan across the eaves, and the fire crackled softly. Warren stood and fetched a cloth to help with the cleanup. Their hands brushed as they reached for the same bowl. Josephine didn't pull away. "I've been thinking," Warren said, voice low. "If Olive's going to grow up here, she'll need more than quilts and cradles." Josephine tilted her head. "What do you mean?" "There's a schoolhouse down in Corbin. Small but proper. If you'd want once she's older, we could make the trip." Josephine's lips parted slightly. "You'd go with us." "I'd take you," he said, "and wait outside every day if she needed me to." She reached across the table and touched his wrist. "You think in years now." "Not just days. I started the day I found you." Her fingers tightened gently. "You make it easy to hope again." He turned his palm up beneath hers. "I won't give you reason not to." Olive stirred in her sleep, letting out a tiny sigh. Josephine looked toward her, then back to Warren. "I never imagined I'd find another man I could count on." "You didn't find me," he said. "I found you." Josephine stood slowly and walked around the table. She stopped in front of him, close enough that their breath mingled. "I want to build something here," she said. "But I won't be kept like a ghost of someone's past." Warren met her eyes. "You're not a shadow. You're the start." She kissed him then, not hurried or questioning, but quiet and sure, like laying the first stone of a foundation. His hand came to her waist, steady as the earth beneath them. When they drew apart, she didn't step away. "You'll need to make that second bed frame soon," she said. "I'll start tomorrow." She rested her forehead against his. "We'll need a second chair too," he smiled just faintly. "Then I'll build two." And for the first time in a long while, the future felt not like something to survive, but something to shape with their own hands. The thaw came late that year. By early March, the snow had begun to rot at the edges, receding in patches around the tree trunks and along the south-facing slope behind the cabin. Sap rose in the pines. The air still carried a bite, but the light had changed longer now and golden in the late hours. Warren had finished the small bed frame and set it beside the cradle, though Olive still preferred to sleep curled in her mother's arms. He was working on a proper table now, one that would seat three. Josephine had started keeping a list tucked into the corner of the cupboard: what seeds to trade for, what wood oil was needed, what muslin could be spared for curtains if the freight wagon came through before planting. One afternoon, as the sky turned the soft gray of melt season, Josephine was kneeling in the garden plot Warren had cleared by the bluff. The soil was hard and clumped, but she worked it slowly with a hand hoe, breaking it down inch by inch. Olive sat on a quilt nearby, chewing a button Josephine had sewn to a leather thong. "I've been thinking on a fence," Warren said, coming up behind her. "Keep the elk out." Josephine sat back on her heels. "Wood or stone?" "Stone slower, but it won't rot." She looked over the uneven ground and nodded. "We've got time." Warren crouched beside her, brushing a bit of soil from his palm. "You always this patient?" "I used to be in a hurry. Seemed like I was always chasing something that wouldn't wait." "What changed?" "I stopped running." He met her gaze. "You make this place feel more like mine than it ever did before." She reached out and touched his sleeve. "That's because it's ours now." That night, after Olive was asleep and the fire had burned low, Warren leaned over the table, sharpening one of his carving knives. Josephine was darning a pair of socks by lantern light, her hair bound loosely at the nape of her neck. The silence between them had grown rich, with no need to fill it. "I got a letter from the freight man," Warren said without looking up. "He passed it through from Dillon." Josephine's needle paused. From who? Warren set the knife down. An old friend from the army. He's got a stretch of land near the Bitterroots. Said he's looking to sell come summer. She watched him. You thinking of buying? No, he said. But I thought we might ride out and see it, take Olive, just to stretch our legs. Josephine smiled quietly. You want to leave? I want to see more of what's out there, with you. She tied off the thread and folded the socks. I wouldn't mind showing her the mountains. He reached across the table and took her hand. Then let's make plans. Spring deepened. The snow gave way to cold rain, and the creek roared back to life. Josephine planted beets and onions, peas and carrots. Warren built the fence, stone by stone, his hands rough and weather-worn. One morning in April, Josephine stepped outside and stood still by the porch. Warren came up behind her, following her gaze. A lone doe stood at the edge of the trees, belly round with fawn. She watched the cabin for a long time, then turned and vanished between the pines. She's looking for somewhere safe, Josephine said. She found it. They made the trip to Corbin in early May. The road was clear and dry enough to take the wagon Warren had traded for over the winter. Olive sat between them, gumming a piece of cloth Josephine had dipped in peppermint water. The schoolhouse stood quiet, but sound a single-room structure with a bell and a clean roof. Josephine walked around it slowly, taking it in. She'll be ready in a few years, she said. Warren wrapped an arm around her waist. We've got time. They stopped at the mercantile, where Warren bought a bolt of red calico and a tin of honey. Josephine ran her hands over the cloth and looked up at him. You remembered. I remember everything you say. That night back at the cabin, Josephine unrolled the cloth across the new table and spread her fingers across it. I used to think love was thunder, she said, loud and fast, but it's this. Warren pulled her close, his hands firm at her back. It's waking up every day knowing where you belong. She laid her head against his chest. Then I'm home. They married in June beneath the cottonwoods by the creek. No preacher, just their hands joined and vows spoken low. Olive watched from her mother's hip, eyes wide with light. Warren carved 2 rings from elk horn. Josephine wore hers on a ribbon around her neck. They built a life of quiet days and long evenings. Olive learned to walk, then to run, her laughter carrying through the trees. The garden grew thick with food and the stone fence held strong. At night, they sat beside the fire, Josephine's head on Warren's shoulder, his fingers tracing slow circles on her arm. There were no more questions between them, only shared breath and the sound of the wind moving through the eaves. Love didn't come in declarations. It came in the way Warren always set a place for her first. In the way Josephine turned down his side of the quilt before he came to bed. In the soft knock of Olive's feet against the floor each morning, and the way her parents' hands always found each other by nightfall. The path hadn't been straight, but it led them here, and they never left.